11:21?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I know that when you record these meetings, it's going to store it somewhere on your computer.
Right.
And it'll tell you, but I have not been able to open a recorded meeting yet.
Oh, no. Okay.
So just so you know, it's a file name that I've never even seen before, but well, it downloaded it to my OneDrive.
Okay.
But
my husband's an IT guy, so I'll get him to help me figure all that out.
When you figure that out, let me know, because I have somebody who wants to see the last meeting that we did, and I can't figure it out. I've tried everything I know how to do. So.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. All right, we're up to 7 now.
Mm-hmm. Everybody usually comes in at the last minute.
Yeah. Whenever we teach our in-person classes at the condo and HOA shows, we sometimes have people that show up almost like 30 to 40 minutes before the class starts. So webinars are a lot different. Okay. All right, welcome everybody. People are slowly trickling in. I know there was another group that had a meeting around the same time, so we'll give everybody some time to finish up there and come on over.
Oh, theirs is later than ours. So
Oh,
ours
it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. Good. Good. Oh, goodness. When that storm yesterday, Sebastian Inlet and Indian River actually had some hail.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The winds weren't too bad on our side. It was just consistent rain all day, so that was surprising to hear.
Ron Peck is in the house. Nice to see you there, Ron.
All right, welcome.
Hello, ladies. Hello, everyone.
Hello, good morning. Got a little elevator music for you guys until we can get everybody on here and ready to go. If it's putting you to sleep, let me know and I can change it up.
I need a little B-52s on there or something.
You're right. All right, let me get Kevin in here. We can get him set up.
All right, here we go. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Rainey from CAI, and we are starting our CAI University with some of these webinars so that you can get your credits for all the things that you need for this year for renewing your license. And so today we have Kevin Downs, and he's the owner of Five Star Claims Adjusters. They're private insurance adjusters over there in Brevard County, and you might recognize Chelsea from I think they sponsored the January luncheon, if I'm not mistaken, back in January 9th, if you recall. And so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce them and get them started, and they're going to take over, and I'm going to take my video off, and I'm going to mute myself. So if you have any questions and you're not familiar with, very familiar with Zoom, down at the bottom, if you take your mouse and you go to the bottom of the screen, there's the chat feature. And you can just go ahead and type your questions in there, and Chelsea's going to be monitoring that from her other screen, and then they will have questions and answers. So you can ask your questions pretty much at any time, and then they may not get to the end, but they'll try to address any questions that you have, and this is a really good opportunity for you to get the answers that you're needing, from insurance experts. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Kevin Downs here. And yes, this is a 1-hour CEU class, Ron, it is. Okay, so I think you found the chat feature, so that's good. If you have any questions or anything, you can go ahead and email me. I did send them the list of all the participants, so she will have sent to you already the evaluation form and also the handout, so that you have that and you can print it out if you want to. If you have anything else that you have questions about, you can always email me at exdir@caicf.org. Okay, and I will come back on, hopefully, I can figure it out, at the end of the conversation. Okay, so here's the class. Kevin, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rainey. And thank you to all the CAMs and others that are out there that are going to sit in on this class. My hope is to be able to just create maximum value for you guys and for your clients. So this is a very fluid class. It's never taught the same twice. And please, if you ever have any questions, if you have any comments, if there's anything you want me to elaborate on, or we want to dive in deeper on some sort of a topic, I am absolutely open to that. It's difficult to get, 15 years of experience and knowledge from here to you guys in 1 hour. So I'm certainly open to moving in directions that are most important to you guys right now. And so thank you. Thank you again for having me. And thank you, Chelsea, for getting this all set up. So hopefully all of you have your outline form where you can take some notes. We're going to be issuing these certificates at the end. And there's also an evaluation form. We only want those back if they're good. All right. So if you have anything bad to say that, we do not want you to turn it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Even that is constructive, and I'm willing to accept it. So, and then we can send you a copy of the presentation as well, like Rainey had mentioned, at the end of the class, so that if you all wanted to have that for review at a later date, that's fine as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Tell you a little bit about me and my background, and hopefully this is going to work here for me. Chelsea? I did, yeah. Technical difficulties already. So anyway, we're gonna at some point get these slides to advance. But if you guys see me start to fall asleep, just know that I have a new baby son. He's 5 months old. Sometimes I have to feed him in the middle of the night. So just yell at me and I'll wake back up. But basically, who am I? And I'll tell you a little bit about, there he is. There's little Isaac Christopher. Born and raised in Florida, Florida native, which is kind of rare. Obviously seen a lot of great stuff in our awesome state. Went to school at the University of Florida. I've sold insurance for 5 years, which is very interesting, you know, that now I am a public adjuster. But I was in the roofing industry for a year, so I learned a lot about roofing systems and why insurance companies are usually resistant to pay for full replacements, because they are expensive, obviously. But since 13, 14 years ago now, '06, I have been licensed and appointed by the Florida Department of Financial Services as a public insurance adjuster. So basically, we are adjusters that represent the property owners in the communities, not the insurance companies. And we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of adjusters. I'm IICRC certified, so I'm a water restoration technician, mold remediation specialist. I don't perform any of that, never have. I simply have those certifications because I'm an expert witness. I testify in trials, and it also makes me very deadly when it comes to insurance claims and things that the insurance company may not always agree to pay for unless I explain it to them very clearly. We founded a company, 5-Star Claims Adjusting, almost 15 years ago now. The brand that we go by is askanadjuster.com. It's a website where people have access. We have over 100 licensed public adjusters all throughout Florida and the Southeast. A lot of times we do free inspections, give free advice, free policy reviews. And then naturally, not everything is a claim, but if there's claims and the communities or property managers need a hand, by all means, that's how we feed our families. And to date, we've delivered actually over $800 million in Florida. This year, we will break the $1 billion threshold. We will have delivered over $1 billion to Floridians from insurance claims of all sorts of magnitude, you know, whether it's window damages, roof damages, plumbing issues, AC overflows, mold, sinkholes, fire, lightning, you name it. So lots of great experience. And again, I just want to remind you, if you have a certain question or if something triggers a thought and you want to pop it into the chat, this is very fluid, and we absolutely will stop and we'll dive into that because hopefully some other people are thinking about it as well. I've also inspected thousands of commercial and residential properties. I've probably even climbed on some of your guys' communities, so which is kind of cool. And then, like I mentioned before, I have testified in probably close to 10 to 12 trials. I've had maybe 40, 50, 60 depositions. You know, the beauty in that, it's not fun when you go through it, but the beauty in that is you absolutely learn the things that the insurance companies don't want you to know. And so that's part of what I'm going to teach you guys today is some tips and some tricks and some hints that'll just hopefully help you, you know, with the claims process, make it go smoother, faster, and ultimately help you get your community restored properly without having to shell out a bunch of money on assessments and things like that. I do want to give you a disclaimer. Even though we work with over 15 to 20 different law firms and they have special rates that they give our clients, I am not an attorney, so I'm not allowed to give you legal advice. So anything I say, you guys should clear that with your own attorneys. And that's my disclaimer. I'm sticking to it. So here we go. Let's see here. Insurance, what is it? Who needs it? You know, this is obviously a pretty hot topic every legislative session, but, you know, for the purpose of this class, a lot of you are community association managers, and most likely you're managing a community that's considered a condo association. However, if it is an HOA, which is different, a homeowners association, then you may not necessarily be governed under statute 718. But in terms of 718, you know, it's going to dictate who covers what. And so naturally, you guys have associations, you have a board. And so a lot of the envelopes of these buildings are going to be covered by the association. And then the interior stuff is going to be covered by the unit owners. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But most important part of insurance is that you can actually collect from it, right? And so I hope we can all agree that your policy is only going to have value if you can actually make a recovery from it. But the definition is a promise to pay for a potential future loss, right? So you hope you pay your premiums, never have to use it. But when the time comes to use it, let's make sure you can collect. Let's make sure you can get everything that you deserve and that you're owed. And let's try to do it quickly and fairly. And so one of the things that I had learned along the way in the industry from some older guys that are probably not even around anymore, but does anybody know where the term underwriter came from? And this is pretty interesting. So, and naturally, I'm usually teaching this live, and so nobody ever raises their hand, but I'll just go ahead and dive right in. So in Great Britain, they used to sail a lot of ships all across the oceans and deliver goods. And in the pubs, they used to put up a board and they had the name of the ship that was going to be going out. And anybody in that pub, if they wanted to insure some of that risk, they could actually write their name under the name of the ship. If the ship completed the voyage, they received a little premium that they got. And if the ship did not complete the voyage, they then had to pay for the losses. And so because they placed their name under the names of those ships that are going out, that is where the term underwriter came from. So there you go. Little piece of knowledge for you guys. That is not my dog. All right, so it got a little funky, but basically that's a dog chasing its tail. And even though I have 6 dogs, that one is not my dog. But, you know, at the end of the day, the insurance claim process, it can be very frustrating. And we certainly don't want any of you to feel like you're having to chase your tail or your clients. And so, again, part of our hope is to give you guys some amazing pieces of information today that will hopefully make you very equipped and effective to get your claims paid quickly and fairly. And so one of the things that we try to highlight is how to best prepare before you actually have a claim, right? Because hindsight is always 20/20. I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard the term pre-existing condition, but that's typically not a good thing when you're dealing with insurances. And so that really falls into 2 categories. The first category is the property itself. One of the things that we advocate, something that we perform, again, with over 100 licensed adjusters all over the state of Florida, we climb on probably over a dozen communities daily. And so basically what we advocate is to get some sort of a baseline inspection of your envelope of your buildings in particular. And you should really be doing that annually. And we typically do them, we try to do them before we actually get ramped up into hurricane season. Why would that be important? Well, if any of you have ever filed a claim and you've ever had a carrier tell you, oh, that was already there, or that was caused by a lack of maintenance or faulty workmanship or improper installation or defective materials, I mean, you name it. So, you know, in these baseline inspections, really our goal is to just be able to show that the property is in decent condition today, that there's no outstanding issues that we're aware of. And so naturally, when a storm passes through and all of a sudden now your roofs are leaking or your windows are leaking or you've got stucco bulging out on your communities, naturally we now have a basis to argue that this must have happened as a result of this event, or at least partially caused by a result of that event. And so we have found that in getting these baseline inspections, particularly having them done by someone who routinely collects money from an insurance company, whether your attorneys offer them, which I haven't seen that before, but it's possible. Typically public adjusters or engineers would normally do these. I don't recommend necessarily spending a bunch of money doing them, but you're certainly welcome to hire an engineer. But I know that for our company, we do them for free. We do them as a courtesy. And our hope is that we can establish a relationship and that one day, if you need the data, we can certainly send it to you and support the fact that the issues were not there prior to whatever event had occurred. So getting a baseline, having your vendors on standby. I'm not going to really talk too much about that because I know a lot of you have been in the management business for quite a while, and you probably have, you know, your roofers and your plumbers and your landscapers and your restoration companies and things like that. But naturally, you want to be vetting them. You want to obviously go through a process for that. And then having your records organized and available, that is key as well. I know when we were standing at the Panama City Mall, within 48 hours of Hurricane Michael's landfall, a lot of those buildings up there were so devastated that a lot of people could not get to their records. And so we have some recommendations on how you can store those and protect them and make them readily available, you know, should you really go through a major event or have some major devastation at your community. And then the second piece to that puzzle is the policy itself, the insurance policy. I can't tell you how many times, you know, we're sitting in a conference room with a board and their mouth literally drops when I explain to them some of the things that are in their policy and the fact that Mr. Lloyd's of London doesn't want to pay them $2 million, and here's what we're going to have to do in order to go through that process. So we certainly want to highlight that, because at the end of the day, that is going to be part of the rules that we're going to have to deal with, is what's in that policy. And so naturally, we want you to be aware of that beforehand, before you actually need to utilize it. And so that's something we do as well. We do the free baseline inspection, free policy review. And again, the key there is you should have those things done by people that routinely collect money from the insurance companies, because they're going to know what to look for. Unfortunately, a lot of the agents, you know, they sell insurances, but they don't really deal with the claim side of things as much. And so even a lot of them I've seen where they're not aware of the certain things that are not good when it's time for a claim. And so we just don't want you to learn that the hard way. So it's one thing to say something, and it's a whole nother matter to actually prove it. And so hopefully with this video, you guys will remember that. But basically, you know, having documentation, I mean, I can verbally say something all day long, but if I'm literally submitting photographic evidence, reports, affidavits, that just carries so much more weight when you're dealing with the claims process, as opposed to a lot of he said, she said, and verbal, you know, verbal accusations, if you will. So in terms of your policy, here's a couple of things that we've come across which have been very, very scary, in so to speak, especially for the communities that you guys manage. So this first one on the left is a hurricane / tropical storm Irma exclusion. And so if you read the language of this, it is extremely beneficial to the insurance company and not to your community. And basically what it says is, if your community was affected almost in any way by Irma, whether directly or indirectly, then any damages as a result of that storm are going to be excluded. And so why would that be important? Well, let me fast forward. Irma is expiring in roughly 100 days or so. In about 100 days, you will no longer be able to file or reopen a Hurricane Irma claim. And so when this exclusion goes widespread, and every policy has it, if you have a new storm, what will you have in your file to prove that your community was not affected by Irma, that your windows were not affected by Irma, or your roofs or your exteriors? And so this is pretty scary. This is definitely something that you should all be aware of, that's going to be coming down the pipe. And the best thing that you can do to combat this is to get that baseline inspection, have something in your file that says, hey, as of June 2020, you know, we were in good shape. Our roofs were fine, our windows were fine, our exteriors were fine, and now they're not, which means clearly this new storm was the cause. Again, I can't tell you how many people, when I ask them the question, what do you have in your file to prove that Irma did not affect your community, and they just look at me with a blank stare. So obviously that's not a good answer. The second thing that we've come across, and the scary part about this one, is it's already in probably 20 to 25% of all of your policies as we sit here and speak. So it is a dispute resolution. Well, what does that mean? So if let's say your community has a large plumbing issue, you find out that you've got some old cast iron drain lines or something along those lines. Chelsea, we have some kind of a low battery. You may want to plug that in. So you got a plumbing issue, you got a storm damage concern, maybe you had a fire, something like that. And, you know, our scope of work, your claim amount is $1 million. And Lloyd's of London says, nope, I'm only paying you $100 grand, right? And so we've got to go get that other $900,000. Well, unfortunately, in this policy, which is going to be in about 20 to 25% of all of your policies right now, and you may not even know it, there is an arbitration clause. Okay, so any dispute gets remanded to arbitration. Not really a terrible problem, except look down at the highlighted piece about 3/4 of the way down. The seat of the arbitration shall be in New York, and the arbitration tribunal shall apply the law of New York as the proper law of insurance. So let me ask you a question. Do you think it is an advantage for your board to have to now arbitrate in New York, governed by New York laws? I can tell you the answer to that, and it's no. The answer is no. It's not an advantage, not a good thing. If you have it in your policy, ideally, let's point it out to your agent, ask him to get that out of there. Because I can tell you that typically when we're involved and we now have to tell the board that, hey, this is going to be the next step in the process. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be lengthy. It's going to be a huge deterrent. Not impossible to successfully recover what's needed, but certainly not nearly as easy as a majority of other options, which you would have if you did not have that clause in your policy. So just a couple of examples of things that we've seen along our travels. And certainly something that if your boards have these items in their policy, I would love for them to know that today prior to calling us for help so that we can hopefully get them out of there. And again, our company does a free policy review, a free baseline inspection. Doesn't have to be us, but it should certainly be someone who collects money from the insurance companies as a matter of what they practice. We have a question here.
Why does it work this way when insurance is regulated by the state?
Great question. Yeah, so a lot of times in the commercial arena, you're dealing with surplus lines carriers, which are not nearly as highly regulated by the state of Florida. And so the argument, we've seen this thing go all the way through the Supreme Court, and unfortunately the case law, again, according to the attorneys that we work with, the case law supports the fact that because a lot of these carriers are not domiciled in the US, they rely on a Treaties Act, which dictates New York as the proper venue and the proper law. So we have seen that if this is in your policy and you have a dispute, there is no going around it. You're going to have to go through this process if you want to continue to push forward to recover additional funds. And so again, the ideal situation is if this is in your policy, let's find out about it now and let's see if we can get the agent to get it out of there before you end up having an event where you need a hand. Looks like there was one other question as well.
Would video documentation by a property manager be sufficient for insurance company?
Great question. So somebody had asked, would video documentation by a property manager be sufficient for the insurance company? And I think that question was asked in terms of the baseline. The answer is it certainly would not hurt. However, I know that as property managers, you guys usually have about 3 full-time jobs already. And the odds of you climbing on roofs, climbing the exteriors of the buildings and videoing and documenting things in such a way that the insurance company would not be able to poke holes, that would be my only concern. I once saw a roofing contractor that said, hey, we'll do a baseline for you and we'll fly a drone. Well, the problem with that is a lot of these carriers will quickly and easily poke holes in those drones inspections versus actually climbing on those buildings. And so it certainly wouldn't hurt. You as a manager could do that. It's not going to hurt you to do that. However, I just don't know that it would be enough to overcome their arguments when they send an engineer or they send their adjuster who then says, you know, this stuff looks like it was already here, or it looks like it was initially affected by Irma or what have you. So hopefully that answered that question. And I'm going to try to remember to read the questions before I simply just answer them, because I don't know if everybody can see them or not. So I'll try to remember to do that. Any others on that before we move forward? The policy. Some of
your thoughts on annual video documentation of all infrastructure?
Yeah, that was the one we just answered from Kevin. It's going to be an easy name to remember. Thanks, Kev. So potential vendors and their respective roles, who they are, what do they do? So, you know, in our arena as claims handlers, you know, we typically are dealing with public adjusters, attorneys, and contractors, right? And then so on your guys' side of the equation, you know, you're the property manager, you're dealing with a board, you're dealing with residents, and then you're dealing with a lot of property, a lot of community. And so the question becomes, how do you choose, you know, which is right for you, which is right for your clients? And a lot of times that's really going to come down to experience. Also, the size of a company can really matter, especially if we get hit with a storm. As you can imagine, you know, a lot of contractors, attorneys, even a lot of smaller public adjusting firms, they just get swamped so quickly And so the last thing you want to do is end up, securing a vendor that just can't get back to you in time and help you. One of the big tips that we always give is try to avoid the over-promise and under-deliver. And so written timelines is something that I think is always wise. I know we've had times where we've been competing against other smaller public adjusting firms for very large communities. And one of the things that we're able to do is we're able to commit to timelines. How quickly will we inspect the property? How quickly will we build the claim package? How quickly will you guys have an actual estimate of what you're owed as a community? And because of our size, with over 100 licensed public adjusters, we're able to meet extremely tight timelines, which ultimately moves things a lot faster for you. One thing that I will mention, that little last line on there, and you could insert anything you want in there, right? Not all blank are created equal. And so naturally, we've seen a lot of good and bad from all sides of the equation. And so, I think the big takeaway here is just be careful what people promise you. Let's see it in writing. Let's see it in writing, and let's get some timelines to back it up, and then we've got something to talk about, so. Potential vendors, their respective roles. Again, we talked about this. What's their background? What's their experience level? Who's going to manage the project? When you're dealing with restoring a community, you're dealing with a lot of different facets, and it really should not be handled, at least in my opinion, by all the same person. And so we'll talk a little bit about contractors that have been out there in the marketplace, essentially telling communities and managers, hey, I'll handle the claim. I'll deal with the insurance company, and then I'll fix everything. And I can tell you that that's a huge conflict of interest. It's something that the state certainly regulates against. And so you really are going to need some sort of a team. You're going to need some good legal advice somewhere along the way, most likely. You're going to need somebody that's going to be responsible for the claim process and recovering the right amount of funds. And then you're going to need somebody that's going to actually make the restoration of the community, the person that's going to tear everything up and put it all back together. And so we'll talk a little bit about each of those roles, but obviously highlighting the areas that I think would matter most, especially in a 1-hour class. So before you hire a contractor, a couple of quick tips. DVPR has got a great spot where you can check them out. I'll tell you the biggest tip that I can give you, if anybody have ever heard of that super cool little person by the name of Google. Google just seems to know everybody and knows a lot about them, which is kind of scary. Start by doing that. Just start by Googling these prospective vendors and just dig around a little bit. And the other thing too, when you're dealing with contractors, your local building officials, they should know them. Your project should not be the first permit that they're pulling in that area, right? That's a little bit scary. So, that's another great tip. Obviously, checking out all their certificates of liability, things like that, workman's comp, those are big as well. But those couple of tips, the Google, the DVPR, and then actually checking with the local building officials, that's going to give you a pretty darn good indication of whether or not they can handle your project. And then more importantly is getting it in writing, right? So don't allow them to just promise that they're going to do all these things. Let's actually see it in writing. Let's see some timelines and a payment schedule, and protect your guys against being over-promised and under-delivered. Carrier vendors versus using your own. This is a trend that we've seen in the industry where that guy looks super scary, by the way. This is a trend that we've seen. It's got to be from the carriers, So this is a trend that we've seen in the industry where the insurance companies want to send out their people, right? Oh, so you need dry out done, you need your roofs tarped, whatever it might be. We'll send our people, we'll let them handle it, and then we'll pay them. And there's obviously a little bit of a danger in that, right? Because at the end of the day, the insurance company is going to be looking out for their interests. You obviously want to be looking out for your interests. And so when they send a vendor, who does that vendor work for? Do they work for you, or do they work for the insurance company? Naturally, they work for the insurance company. And so that just leaves you to question, are they going to have your interests at heart? And the answer is maybe not. And so we always recommend, if possible, having your own vendors performing things, obviously documenting things properly before they start tearing anything up or putting anything back together. But there are some advantages and disadvantages. I would say anytime the carrier wants to send someone out, you should certainly have somebody that's your advocate that's going to be present as well, just to ensure that the community's interests are served to the best of your ability. Can a contractor assist with my claim? So this was actually a warning that was issued by Jimmy Petronas, the CFO. This came out, I believe, after Hurricane Michael. And what we found is, again, a lot of contractors will essentially tell a community or property manager, hey, I'll handle the claim and then I'll put everything back together for whatever they pay. And unfortunately, that's just a huge conflict of interest, especially in Florida. And the contractor ultimately would need to have a public adjuster license in order to do that. And so naturally, just like we are not allowed to adjust the claim and turn around and fix everything, the contractor isn't either. And so if you have a contractor that's approaching you, that's telling you that they will take care of the claim, your first question is, are you a licensed public adjuster or an attorney? And if the answer is no, then we need to find someone who is, that's going to handle that part of the process. Because by law, you don't want to run into a situation where you end up in a dispute. You've got a contractor that's been navigating it, and now the entire thing is tangled up in a big mess, and your community can't get the funds they need in order to get properly restored. And I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate that. The insurance company doesn't want the guy that's going to be fixing it telling him how much it should cost. It's a little bit of a conflict there. So what is an assignment of benefits and how does it affect me? Up until yesterday, I had not dealt with any other companies as of July 1st last year that are still using assignment of benefits. But believe it or not, there was a restoration company approached us yesterday. They are still using AOBs. And so basically what an assignment of benefits does is it more or less assigns away the benefits of the claim for the community. It was a very unfortunate situation. It used to be a great tool that was used by emergency companies in lieu of you writing them a check. The middle of the night, you have a storm come through, you got water in the building, you need somebody to get the water out and tarp the roof. If you're not standing there with a check in hand, this was a tool that was used in order for these contractors to be able to be assured that they were going to get paid. The problem is it became abused. Contractors began having these signed and they were blank. They performed no work, submitted no sort of invoice, and ultimately took control of the entire claim. And unfortunately, the board and the property manager had no more say-so. And so that's a problem. We don't really see these anymore, so we don't talk too much about it. But if any of you have ever dealt with an assignment of benefits, or if any of you have known somebody that has, it's definitely a dangerous place to be. And so my thought for you would be this: anybody that's committing to doing work at the community, you should have something in writing that's going to tell you how much it's going to cost and who's going to pay for it, right? And so if you're ever being asked to sign something and you're not sure exactly what you're signing, don't sign. Sit tight, get some advice. These were the bills that were passed. They took effect last year, July 1. Again, up until yesterday, I haven't even seen a single company using these anymore. But if you run into this, just know that, what you're signing, it's very important to understand that. So the types of the different types of insurance adjusters in the state of Florida. This is amazing that so few of us have ever even heard of a public adjuster. But basically, there's 3 types of insurance adjusters that are licensed and appointed through the Department of Financial Services. An insurance company adjuster, which is an adjuster that works directly for one company, like State Farm used to have captive adjusters. They worked only for State Farm. Then you have independent adjusters. These are adjusters that represent the insurance company. They look out for the insurance company, but they can work for multiple companies. So they can go to your community today for Zurich. They can go to Kevin's community tomorrow for Bankers. They work for an independent firm that is hired out by multiple insurance carriers. But it's important to know that both of those adjusters, insurance and independent, they both work on behalf of the insurance company. The only license in the state on behalf of the property owner is a public adjuster. A public adjuster or an attorney are the only professionals in the state of Florida that are licensed to be able to assist the property owner with the recovery of their insurance claim. And so that's very important. If you're approached by somebody, and let's say they want to call themselves a consultant, okay? The issue with a consultant approaching you and telling you that they're going to handle their claim is who regulates them? No one. No one regulates consultants. And so if things don't go well and you have hired a consultant, what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to go to in order to get some help? Unfortunately, again, you might find yourself entangled in a big mess. The community can't get the funds they need to get it restored. And so it just becomes a big problem. So caution on that. If you're approached by people that want to help you with your claim and they're calling themselves consultants, I would say that you need to get a lot more information before you would appoint someone like that who may not be regulated. Should I be getting a second opinion? Certainly not from that guy, but yes, yes, you should. So is there an advocate for policyholders? Yes, that is a public insurance adjuster. So this was a study that was done by the Office of Program Policy Analysis and Government Accountability. Wow, try to say that 3 times. OPAGA, we just call it OPAGA. It was done by the Florida legislature. I believe they studied, I think it was roughly 10,000 claims. What they found is here in the state of Florida, when a community or an insured or a property manager has their own public insurance adjuster, miraculously they average somewhere between 500 and 747% more money. So I would tell you, as an advocate for you, for your communities, yes, you should always have somebody that's looking out for your interests and going to build a claim package to tell the carrier what you should be paid versus telling the carrier, hey, just let me know what you think you owe me. That's always a dangerous position to be in. The role of a public adjuster. So in a nutshell, a lot of what we do is we come out, we do a very thorough inspection. We carry thermal imaging equipment, we carry moisture detection equipment. And basically what we're doing is we are documenting any damages, any areas of restoration that are needed. Sometimes there's areas of the community that are affected, not necessarily directly by the event, but they're affected by the actual repair process. And so our role is to inspect, document, and then build a comprehensive claim package so that we can simply submit that to your insurance company and say, hello, Mr. Insurance, this is how much you owe our community. And that begins our starting point. And I don't know how many of you have dealt with claims in the past, but I bet each of you have probably dealt with at least one claim. And so often I see the exact opposite. I see the community sitting back and waiting for the insurance guys to tell them what they think they should pay them. And the problem with that is they're the ones writing the check. Somebody needs to be looking out for your interests so that you can document, find everything that was affected, and then simply tell them politely how much they should be writing the check for. And I think that's very important. If there's something you could take away from this, it would be that. It would be that you should be building a claim package or having someone build a claim package to tell them how much you are owed. Do not sit back and wait for them to tell you. Generally, we deal with all sorts of claims. You guys can read those there. And again, I'm not going to follow this to the T because you all are very capable of reading this later at another time. And we also work on a contingency fee. That's required by law. If you ever have someone approach you that says they're a public adjuster and you need to pay them something up front, I would tell you that that is absolutely not okay. By law, we are required to work on a contingency fee. It's typically 20% of whatever recovered amount is delivered. Sometimes it can be as low as 10%, you know, just depending on the nature and extent of the claim and so forth. And when we're working on a contingency fee, again, if there's no recovery by law, you absolutely should not be paying for any sort of services. Any questions on that, by the way? Anything popping up in the chat, Chelsea? Okay, perfect. Gonna keep rolling. Doing great on time. So real quick, Hurricane Irma, 2017, I wanted to highlight a couple of stats for you guys. So 60,000 commercial property claims filed, and 25,000 of those were closed without ever paying a single dollar. It's almost 50%. So almost 50% of all the commercial claims were closed from Irma that were never paid a single dollar. I would venture to guess they did not have a public adjuster. They did not have somebody that was an advocate, inspect those properties, document the damages, and tell the carrier how much they should have been paid. And so here is a forensic wind map. We spent a lot of money on a forensic weather engineer, and we plotted the path of Irma. And I wanted to show you guys a couple of very interesting facts. These are factual data. If you look to the right of this, you'll see Dr. Phillips area, right? Lake Buena Vista. So we know that this is Central Florida, and we know that there was a 91-mile-an-hour gust from Irma right there in Orlando, right there in Central Florida. So my question for you is, if you're managing a community and your buildings are more than maybe 10 years old, what are the likelihood that a storm with 90-mile-an-hour winds that passed by through the course of 10 to 12 hours would have possibly affected your building, whether it's the roof, the windows, the exteriors? The likelihood is extremely high. It's extremely high. The carriers have this data. The carriers know this information. And so that's why they're coming out with these exclusions. Here's another one where we recorded almost 80 miles an hour over by the university. And so one of the things that we also recommend, which is proprietary to our firm, is we are happy to plot your community on this forensic weather map for you. So if you're interested, if you want to know what the winds were in your area from Irma and whether you should have your buildings looked at before this deadline comes, we're happy to do that for you. It doesn't cost anything. You just simply need to shoot us a request and we can do that. Here's another one, looks like to the northeast of Lake Mary, near the Sanford area, 75-mile-an-hour winds. So again, you know, when you think about a thunderstorm, right? So in the summertime, Florida, we get storms sweep across the state. How long does this thunderstorm usually last? 7 minutes, maybe 10, right? You know, that's the joke in Florida. If it's raining now, wait 10 minutes, it'll be bright and sunny. So, but we're talking about sustained winds and heavy gusts where this storm was literally traveling, I think, 10 to 12 hours through the area. So you throw, you know, a few minutes of winds, not a big deal. When you throw 10 to 12 hours of winds against the envelopes of these buildings, again, the likelihood of them being affected is high, and it's not always very obvious. You know, just because your roof didn't peel wide open doesn't mean it wasn't affected. So it's very important that you have this knowledge, especially coming up on this deadline, in case any of you have communities that are more than, you know, 7 to 10 years old. You really should have somebody do a baseline for you just to be safe. Yes, excuse me, had a question from Jackie. We're hearing we should expect a large insurance increase for 2021. Is that true? Jackie, that is a great question. The answer is it's pretty likely. And I would tell you that you're probably paying for other people's roofs and things like that. You know, we've had a lot of storms. Right now with COVID-19, we've got a huge uproar in terms of business interruption. So we're dealing with a lot of those potential claims and the carriers that don't want to pay them necessarily. So yes, I really haven't seen a period ever in Florida where insurance actually goes down. Usually it only moves one direction. But I think what's most important is to control what's within your control. And so a good baseline inspection, good policy review, good review of coverages, things like that. And then also, if any of you had some sort of effects or you're concerned you may have had effects, you know, now would be the time to find out, because once this deadline comes, unfortunately, there won't be any going back and filing or reopening or anything like that. So I hope that answered your question. How to identify possible covered damages. This is where we get into kind of some of the more fun stuff. So we start typically with exterior elevations. The inspections that are done at these communities are absolutely paramount, and who is doing them is so critical, right? Because if the insurance company is sending out a engineer, the insurance company is sending out an adjuster, or they're sending out a contractor, first question I have for you is, who do they work for? They work for the insurance company. Would you believe me if I told you that I can walk a roof with the insurance company's adjuster or their engineer? We can look at the exact same roof and see two completely separate things. It'll blow your mind. The subjectivity that is in our business is absolutely crazy, but we've learned through the years, we typically build our claim packages with scientific data, which becomes a lot more difficult to lend to subjectivity. So, but who's doing these inspections and what equipment are they using? Absolutely critical. We've had situations, we were down in the Keys after Hurricane Irma. I'm going to give you guys an example. Here's a large marina building. You could see where some of the skylights had actually been sucked out. This is close to ground zero. And so when they filed a claim, the insurance company sent out 3 rounds of engineers, adjusters, contractors, and basically they came up with damages that were $40,000. They used drones and all sorts of other things. When we were retained to assist with the claim as the public adjuster, we actually ended up climbing on the buildings physically. A lot of our guys are rope and harness certified. We had thermal imaging equipment that we were using. And ultimately, at the end of the day, even though they were resistant, we ended up delivering an award for $700,000. That's a huge difference, $40,000 to $700,000 on that award. And so the point of that I'm trying to make is who's doing the inspection, what equipment are they using? You're going to get much different results. And so obviously in that scenario, the proof is in the pudding. The other thing is we like to do a lot of testing. There's all kinds of testing that can be done, which is going to lend to scientific data. And a lot of times I've never seen the carriers want to do any testing. And my guess is because once they get the data, they may not like it. And so some of the areas that we've tested throughout the years using engineers and things like that, roofs, windows, stucco. And so the beauty of a test is whatever the data comes back, it is what it is. Like it or not, the data is the data. And so that's something that we typically would employ as well in a lot of your communities if the carrier is resistant. And I believe we have a question coming in. I'm going to read it off to you. This is from Rainey. So we have a company that will do an inspection with infrared, I think is what she was trying to say, roof inspections even before there is any damage, so that the property has a before and after comparison in case there is a problem in the future. What is your opinion on that? That is a decent thing to have done. The only concern that I could see there is you are going to get different results depending on how long it's been since it's rained and the time of day that you're doing those inspections. So even though that is something that certainly wouldn't hurt to have done, I wouldn't necessarily rely solely on that. I know a lot of roofing companies are offering that. And again, I think that it's a great ancillary addition to getting a full baseline done. But with thermal imaging, the time of day that they're doing it and how long it's been since it's rained, those are going to have big effects. And obviously the carriers are going to be looking to poke holes into that data. So just be cautious of that. But I certainly don't think it would hurt to have that done. Another question came from Ron. And it says, is Xactimate still used by the insurance companies to determine cost of scope of work, cost and scope of work? And the answer is yes. Typically in our industry, majority of the carriers and even our side, typically we're going to be using Xactimate pricing. But Xactimate is not a one size fits all. So it's not it's not necessarily something that has to be done. It just tends to be the industry standard. And there are advantages and disadvantages to it. And typically, because we are an advocate for you and your community, we're usually going to use whatever benefits the community the best. Lastly, on this slide here, top-down approach, moisture intrusion. So if any of you are dealing with any sort of moisture intrusion issue, I don't know if maybe windows leaking, roofs leaking, you're not even sure, but you've got, a funny smell. Just keep in mind that, gravity always wins. So typically we're taking a top-down approach. Part of the reason we carry thermal imaging equipment, moisture detection equipment, we want to find a couple of things. We want to find the source, where's it coming in? And then what was affected? We got to find the footprint. And I'll tell you, after Irma, a huge trend that we saw is storm-created opening versus wind-driven rain. Right? So we had a lot of carriers saying wind-driven rain got into the building, damaged all the drywall, but wind-driven rain is not covered, has to come through a storm-created opening. I will tell you that storm-created opening is not defined in any policy I've ever seen. And so we would go to the general definition of that. And what it is it's an opening that was created by a storm. Could it be temporary? Absolutely. Could it be naked to the visible eye? Absolutely. Could it close up after the storm passes? Absolutely. And so again, any of you that had a claim situation and somebody from the carrier told you it's all wind-driven rain, I would tell you that you absolutely should have your own advocate out there inspecting that property to document otherwise, because I know we've been successful probably 100% of the time overcoming that argument. Any questions on that, by the way? Has anybody ever heard that before, that term wind-driven rain? Nobody jumped up, so I guess not. So how to identify possible covered damages, interiors of sensitivity. You guys can't hear these dogs running around, but if you see this happening in your lobbies, you know that there's something going on. The anomalies, right? The key tip-offs. So, you know, you're coming home to the community, or you're coming into work to the community, you see a 2x4 sticking through a palm tree. I'm going to tell you, you probably had some pretty serious storms in that area, right? Another thing that we would hear, we teach a lot of CE, used to be in person, which was a lot more fun. I'd love to see all you guys. But, you know, we'd have a lot of boards, and they would come by and they would say, you know, we really weren't affected by Irma. We just had a lot of our trees folded over. And I will tell you that if you had trees folded over in your community, you probably had some pretty serious winds. Now, your roof may still look like it's fine from the ground, but you certainly should consider, again, having some sort of inspection done just to assure that you can document that, yeah, even though my trees folded over, everything else on the envelope of my building was fine. But that's always an interesting one. You'll see an example at the bottom left corner. This is on a flat roofing system, and you'll see where the perimeter metal has been actually bent up a little bit. If any of you have flat roofing systems, flat roofs are usually very difficult to see the damages from the wind. And so those are roofing systems that need to be inspected specifically by the right people that are in the business of dealing with wind damage and dealing with carriers. And from time to time, what we've seen is, you know, when a plane is coming off the ground, the speed that the air is traveling over the wing pulls up on the plane. That is an actual low pressure uplift. And the same thing happens on these flat roofing systems. When the winds are passing over the roof, the faster they go, the stronger the uplift forces, which literally pull up the roof and then set it back down. And so a lot of times you get up there and it's very difficult unless you know exactly what you're looking for. You may not even notice that the roof was affected. And then all of a sudden, a year or 2, 3 years later, now it's leaking. And now you're 100% out of pocket. So when in doubt, we always say this, you know, when in doubt, bring us out. Basically, if you have a concern at the community, somebody should be looking at it. Somebody should be doing an inspection for you. That's an advocate for you, and bringing back that info so you can decide what to do about it. Here was a slide that Chelsea slipped in, something that a lot of you all have dealt with quite a bit. She's laughing at me because I know she slipped it in there. We teach another class. We teach a class on construction defects versus insurance claims. And, you know, quite often we find where, for example, stucco, right? Stucco tends to be a hot topic in the defect area. But I'll tell you, I've had numerous communities where because of a windstorm claim, we were dealing with stucco as well, you know, water intrusion. A lot of these communities, at least on that second level or above, you know, they're built out of wood. And what happens when wood gets wet? It swells, it expands. And then what does that do to the cracking in the stucco? It expands it, it makes the cracks bigger, and even more moisture intrudes. So if you're dealing with any sort of situation where it could be a construction defect or it could be an insurance claim, again, make sure that you're getting a good inspection done and some good advice by people that are solely in the business of recovering money from insurance companies and things of this nature, because they're going to be able to give you the advantages and the disadvantages of each, especially when it comes to things like dispute resolutions, the time frame to get your money to restore the community, who pays for the attorneys. A lot of different variables that go into these deductibles. That's another big one. So any of you that are dealing with any of this stuff, we would certainly love to be an advocate for you, to give you some free advice, free inspections, things like that. 10 minutes. Wow, we're gonna have to fly through this. Steps to take when making a claim. How did you discover the damage? How did you document it, right? What evidence shows the cause? That's a big one. We're gonna have to talk about cause of loss because so many people get tripped up because they don't know the answer. And then steps to mitigate. Biggest takeaway here, when the carrier asks you, what did you do to mitigate the damages? The only thing I do not want to ever hear you say is nothing, right? Do not tell them you did nothing. You had to do something, whether it was call somebody to help you, whether you threw a tarp up there, you took a towel and cleaned up the water in the lobby. As long as you did something, that's the best answer. All right, so we're going to try to bounce through this pretty quickly because we're running out of time. And so cause of loss, this is a big one, and I know it's later in the slide. If you are dealing with any sort of moisture intrusion and you don't know where it's coming from, please button that up before you file a claim. Because unfortunately, I have seen time and time again where the carrier will send people to find out and they'll button it up, and almost always it's buttoned up in a fashion that ends up with no coverage. So please, if you're not sure what the cause of the damage is, let's find out. Let's dig deep until we have a source and document it, and then we roll out the claim. Very, very important. Was there a question that came in? Okay, good. Who's going to be your quarterback? Who is going to present the claim to the insurance company? I know that the board would love for the property manager to handle everything and do it for free. But unfortunately, it's just not reasonable. You know, as property managers, you guys already have 3 full-time jobs. You get hit with a storm or have a big plumbing issue or an AC overflow from the chillers, or you're dealing with mold. That in and of itself can be a full-time job. But somebody needs to be the quarterback. Somebody needs to be designated to go and recover the full amount of the funds so that the community does not have to issue assessments. First party versus third party claims. Basically, the biggest thing here, first party is paid typically on a RCV, replacement cost. Third party is paid on an ACV, actual cash value. Also, the attorney fee statute where, like for example, a lot of our clients, the attorneys work for them and they do not take a percentage of the recovery. They get paid by the insurance company. That statute applies to the first party claims. It does not apply to the third party claims. Again, I'm not an attorney. You have to verify that yourselves, but I can tell you that I deal with a lot of them, get a lot of great information. We're going to skip through that. If this will advance. There we go. Steps to take when making a claim. So somebody's got to make the call. Always be polite, always be nice. Even if they're unkind, you have to absolutely just hold your tongue, please, as best you can. I don't know is a 100% acceptable answer. If you are finding yourselves trying to navigate a claim by yourself, you want to call it in, you want to deal with it, you want to deal with the adjusters and just kind of see how it goes, please know that I don't know is a 100% acceptable answer. So if they ask you something and you're not sure, don't guess. Don't try to figure out a elaborate story to paint a picture of why you think it may be this, that, or the other. Best thing is if you don't know, you don't know, and that's totally okay. Best practices, hiring trustworthy vendors, contractors. I think we already talked about that. References, payment schedule is huge. Timeline to perform is huge as well. And don't ever sign anything unless you know exactly what you're signing. Last statement on there, recorded statements. If the insurance company says, hey, I want to take a recorded statement, I want to make sure you understand that they want to do that, not because they're hoping to help you per se. They want to interview you and they want to be able to document those answers. And if you trip up at some point, it could be dangerous for you. So my recommendation is if they want a recorded statement, if they want an examination under oath and EUO, all of these things should be done with some sort of representation by an advocate, somebody that's going to make sure that we keep them in bounds and not asking a bunch of things that either shouldn't be asked or keep asking the same question multiple ways. Property manager's role in the insurance program. Again, According to the board, we want you guys to do everything. We want you to charge us nothing for it. God bless them. So, but there's a lot. You have a lot that you're already dealing with. And then when it comes to claims handling, really ultimately your role should be limited to just, coordinating inspections and giving them access. Other than that, my advice typically is this is an area where you really want your own advocate. Not necessarily something you should probably be spearheading, especially with so much already on your plate. But there's a lot that goes into the claims handling. And one of the big questions we see quite often, can a manager be paid for the extra work they do in terms of handling claims? And so far, what we've seen within the industry and from our side of the equation is the answer is absolutely yes. There's some things that you need to do on your side to button that up. But we could certainly have that conversation another day with you to help assist you with navigating that. But yes, if you're doing a lot more work assisting with the claim, then it would certainly beg the reason that you should be paid for that. And we incorporate those expenses into the claim itself to be paid by the carrier. What types of damage do you potentially file a claim for? So we see a lot of roof issues. We've had a lot of hail coming through, windstorms. Dealing with a lot of business interruption from the COVID-19, plumbing issues. This is a big one, especially for older buildings. A lot of communities don't realize that most of these policies, they owe your community to access all of these pipes, and that can become significant. So if your community is having plumbing issues and you guys are finding yourselves dealing with drain problems, or even on the supply side, those are things that we would absolutely be happy to come and look at and give you some free advice. Lightning strikes is another big one, so difficult to determine everything that was affected. Stucco damage is something we see quite often, concrete restoration. So really, when in doubt, bring us out. We're happy to take a look. Somebody should be advocating for you and inspecting and documenting what the cause is and whether the insurance company should be paying for it. There's just some examples: sinkhole, fire, mold. I think we're like 3 minutes away, so I'm gonna race through this stuff. There's some stucco issues, flat roofing system on the right. You can see where the seams are now wrinkled, which would suggest that roof was lifted and laid back down. And there's some testing you can do. This was a large building in Melbourne, believe it or not. Below the deductible, we delivered them $3.1 million. Here's a hotel on iDrive. Similar scenario, they got $250. We delivered them $4.25 million. Here's a community up in Mexico Beach. Window and door issues. By the way, as a condo association, who covers the windows and doors during an insurable event? The answer is you do, the association. You insure it, you cover it, you've already paid the premium. So I would tell you, if you had some damages from Irma and all you addressed was your roof, somebody should be looking at your windows for you, especially before this deadline comes. In fact, majority of the engineers that I've dealt with, they'll tell you that by the time the roof has failed on the envelope, chances are likely the windows have failed as well. So hopefully that's for somebody out there. What types of claims have you guys filed for? I'm sure we could get a lengthy list. What's the time limit, right? So you have 3 years to file a wind claim. Irma's deadline is September 11th this year, so we're about 100 days out. 3 years on wind, 5 years on other claims, plumbing, sinkhole, fire, things like that, unless your policy limits it. There's an OIR order which says they can't drop you or raise your rates until you get everything fixed. Who covers what? We talked about it. Biggest misconception: windows and doors are covered by the association in a condo during an insurable event. If I could say that 50 times, I would. It's amazing how many boards don't realize that. Here's some examples of window and door damages: gaskets that are ingested, separation at the frame from the wall, warped doors. If any of you had anything like this, we certainly would be willing to come and take a look at it for you. It's no cost for the inspection. Will they raise my rates? Will they drop me? You have a lot of protection from the legislature from being targeted like that. However, just like the other lady had asked before, everybody's rates are going up. I've never seen them go down. So the real question is your community owed a huge recovery to make some restoration, new roofs, new windows? Who knows? But if they're owed for that, surely they would want to at least know that. And then we already answered the property managers being paid from the recovery. This is another big one too, if you could write this down. 3 things on every claim. I preach this to all 100 plus PAs that we have in our firm. I probably go over this every 2 or 3 months. Cause of loss, what caused it? Date of loss, when did it occur or when did you notice it? Mitigation, what did you do to prevent it from getting worse? Please just say something, even if it's, hey, I called Kevin and 5-star, right? Got to tell them something. And so tips to expedite the claim. This is another big one. Proof of loss is a great one. It's a double-edged sword. Make sure you know what you're doing with it. But a proof of loss is going to put the carrier on a tight timeline, which is a beautiful thing for the community, right? We want to get this money as quick as possible. Claims package, who's building that? That is another critical element. You got to tell them how much they owe you. Don't let them tell you, hey, this is what we feel like paying. And then timelines. Check the policy. Make sure that there's no limitations there. Ordinance and law coverage. This talks about other areas of the building that need to be brought up to current codes, which is a great thing as well. You know, at the end of the day, our goal is to save the communities from issuing assessments in order to fully restore the community and use the benefit that they've been paying for all these years in their policy. And do you have to get 3 estimates? The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. You do not have to get 3 estimates. And how do I pay my deductible? This is another great one. If you have a contractor that approaches you and says, hey, I'll handle your claim, write me a check for your deductible, I would tell you that you can use your deductible on any of your covered damages. So if you have maintenance crews, and let's say you had some coverage for some of your landscaping to clean it up, to clean up the debris, you can apply that to your deductible. Why would you pay your deductible in cash if you don't necessarily have to write that check? And that's something that we can talk about again on a later date. I think, are we almost done? Mold package, what's in it? So there's 4 parts to a mold package. I don't know if you guys want me to keep going, but I'm going to race through this. So 4 things, right? First thing, mold assessor comes out, they test. Lab results come back. Is there mold? Yes or no? So assessor comes out, tests, gets lab results, then they write a protocol. They write a protocol to tell a remediation company what has to be done. The assessor and the remediator, in my opinion, should not be the same people, okay? You should have an assessor who is independent and a remediation company who's going to do the work separately. Last thing you need, get the remediation done, get your invoice, and then get a clearance test. Have to have a clearance test. If you don't get a clearance test, don't pay the bill, right? Very important. You got to get your clean bill of health. How does it help my claim? It'll help your claim in a lot of ways, but I can't get into that right now. I'll leave that nugget for later. And so what if I don't know the cause of loss? Again, this one is huge. All repairs should be inspected, but not all will be claims, right? So if you're dealing with mold, if you're dealing with moisture intrusion, if you're dealing with a window issue, a roof issue, a stucco issue, a plumbing issue, let's just get it inspected. Doesn't always mean it's going to be a claim, but at least you'll have more information. When in doubt, bring us out. Phone a friend, right? Thank you guys very much. And I hope you all enjoyed that. Sorry we had to race through. A lot of great information. And again, I only want those feedback forms if it's good. So thanks again. You guys have a great rest of your week. And God bless you. Sure, I'm here all day.
Okay, you guys, thank you for coming to the class. If you have any questions, just go ahead and send them to Kevin. I think we've got his email there for you. Have a great day.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all very much. My honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Man, we're gonna have to trim this down, huh? I had to like race through some of the best parts. Do we need to mute this or anything? Or? Okay. Oh wait, I see it right here.